In the last decade or so, there's been a great shift of appreciation towards an underdog of gaming. No, not the graphics, gameplay, or story, but it's always so sweet when those things go together smoothly. I'm talking about the sound. More specifically, the music and sound design of a game. It holds a lot of purpose and needs to go beyond, yeah, sounds good. Because sound provides both feelings and information. And a lot of the time, when done right, can provide information or emotion without the player fully realizing it. Think about being in a jungle and a tiger attempts to pounce you. You're not seeing that bugger coming. It's sneakily tucked in the grass, creeping towards you, and before you know it, it's too late for you. But hearing it shuffle through the grass is information to your brain. Something is nearby.
Who's that Pokémon?
And as you start running, fear will grow as you hear its mighty roar. Now, imagine that scenario, but with fast-paced music to add to the stress factor. Boom! That's video games. Kind of. A very similar situation that most of you might actually relate to is when you encounter a clicker in The Last of Us. They could be in the next room, clicking about, and even if you don't see them, the fear will put you in place when you hear them. Followed by the eerie drones and drums, just to add to your stress and anxiety that bad things are going down. But that's just one poorly explained example. I would highly recommend watching both Video Game Donkey and Naked Jakey's video on sound effects and music in video games. Links are in the description. They both provide wonderful examples of good sound design and good scores that have us falling in love with games. Whether it be for nostalgia's sake or the sound is really unique and creative, there's a lot to explore. It's cool that sound designers of the game audio community have slowly revealed techniques and insane tricks to creating all sorts of sounds, and just for a video game. A lot of hard work goes into creating a unique sound just for a specific action, item, or character. However, looking at many of the older games, there's a fair share of library sound effects. And that's not to say library sounds are bad or unprofessional. Your favorite movies and TV shows are filled with library sounds. Trust me, it's all part of the process. But for these older games, well, there wasn't necessarily a team of sound designers creating fresh sound effects for every instance of the game. I almost consider ourselves lucky we got original music at the time, all things considered. It's a little hard to tell what was done for Donkey Kong 64 specifically. We all know and love the work done by composer Grant Kirkhope. I know Grant has done some of the voice work for Donkey Kong himself in this game, but looking at the game's credits, it's tough to tell exactly who did what. Regardless, there's a lot of little details within the score and sound effects worth discussing. I want to highlight some of my favorite moments in Donkey Kong 64, as I think you'll start to form an appreciation for these underdog moments. The score is a bit more straightforward, so let's start there. Besides it being catchy and memorable, Grant Kirkhope clearly put a lot of thought into his music. One of the details I've always appreciated is the different uses of themes. There's some of the more straightforward themes like K. Rool, Cranky, Funky, Candy, and Snide. It's that feeling of familiar, whether it's comfortable or eerie. You know what I'm referring to, like Darth Vader or Superman. The character's on screen, we hear the song of the character. It's a wonderful nod to the audience to identify characters in a unique way. But we're hearing more creative themes in DK64 with specific worlds. I love how DK Isle can be considered the home base to music. We spend so much time here bopping around from world to world. When entering a world's lobby, the music sounds, well, it's obviously different. The instruments are different, the tempo and all-around vibe is different from DK Isle, and yet that melody is still there. This is such a fun way to ease the player from one world to another. It's not a full-blown shift, yet it actually feels like we're within the portal, halfway between the two worlds. The lobbies of Angry Aztec, Frantic Factory, Gloomy Galleon, and Creepy Castle are big examples of this melody. The four worlds are all significantly different from one another, yet they all have that familiar melody with their own unique twist. And the music used on the inside of the worlds really focuses on the different rooms and their tone. Occasionally, you'll notice ambient sounds that further complements the score and the immersion. When you enter Crystal Caves, you hear those little drip drops of water along with delicate strings and glockenspiel. When barging into the production room of Frantic Factory, you'll hear a factory banging along with sassy saxophones and brass. The daytime of Fungi Forest is full of life with birds chirping, bugs buzzing, and energetic strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion. Oh, it's all over. Then you get to nighttime and everything makes a dramatic shift. Owls are hooting, crickets are chirping, a distant howl. The strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussions are less energetic and more serious and eerie. Danger awaits at every corner. Also, it's nighttime. Spooky things can happen. But speaking of spooky, I don't have to tell you about the score in Creepy Castle. Every single room is hitting the appropriate vibe. Slow tempo, eerie moans in the background, or creepy distant laughter. Even the music in this big tree was cleverly thought out. It's probably one of the few places in this whole creepy world that could actually be considered safe. It's also really hollow, which the music appropriately reflects with echoed out drums and simplistic melodies. I could go on for hours about just the music used in the worlds. There's great detail within each one, but I think a lot about how with older Pokemon games, I practically have the song memorized for each route and town. Not so much because they're older games, but the way that they're well written. The score in DK64 is more than just a jam, it's the way that it's tied into the game and holding a purpose. Another great category of music with purpose is the shift and tag barrel. One of the reasons why I love this game is the use of instruments. The 5 Kongs have instruments tied to them that accurately reflect their personalities. And while we hear a shift of instrument representation in the DK rap, it's reflected even further in the tag barrel. The music shuffles instruments based on which Kong the player highlights. DK, the chill, easygoing main character. Diddy, rocking out with his electric guitar, ready for action. Linky with his no style, no grace, funny face trombone. Tiny with her very sassy sax. And of course, the timid but hunky Chunky with the timpanis. Isn't it so cool how the music interacts with the game like that? Another great detail with the music interacting with the game is when swimming underwater and hearing the shift in EQ, as if the music is diegetic. A lot of games do this, just to state the obvious, but it's such a fun, small detail and just feels natural. While the backgrounds and other nearby sound effects are being affected by this shift, it's a neat little detail to do the same with music. So now, let's transition to the sound effects used throughout the game. As I mentioned earlier, some of the sounds heard in the game come from libraries. Some of these can be easily recognized from the Cartoon Tracks volume of the Hollywood Edge library. And man, this library got old. Now, a couple of years ago, back when I first made this channel, I came upon a website containing the game's sound effects. This folder had almost 1,000 different audio files, unfortunately with the worst naming convention, but still hundreds of sounds to scroll through. Previewing them really opens your eyes to how many little sounds are in use. The oofs and grunts from beating up enemies, followed by the cartoony punches and impacts, cartoony squeaks, honks, and rattling, character voices, an announcer, doors open and close, vehicles. It's all just so many little things, and without them, the game feels empty. And that's just for this 20-something-year-old game. It goes even further and larger in modern video games. So there's a lot of different categories for sound design to provide different information. As I've mentioned, there's a categories such as characters, items, actions, and feelings. Really, a lot of this subject is discussed in the Nakey Jakey video on sound effects. But the categories can get more unique when in a cartoony or fantasy world. Donkey Kong isn't real, right? But the game feels real, or at least I feel I'm a part of the game when experiencing it. And the sound plays quite a role in that feeling. So I like to think that there's 2 subcategories that play a role in this kind of immersive feeling. And the first being that, wow, it feels so good to play video games kind of feeling. You know, the kind of sound when you've collected a coin in Mario, a ring in Sonic, or an item in Pokemon. Those sounds are wildly known to gamers. You hear that sound because you did a good thing. Wow, that feels good. I need more of it to feel successful in life. And DK64 has a handful of those kind of sounds. I mean, look at what happens every time there's a golden banana. I'm so pumped every time it shows up. The banana voice, the bopping beats, the Kong is doing a little dance. Imagine how much happier life would be if you did this little dance after closing a sale or finalizing a project or ate a banana. So for a game full of collectibles, the sound of collecting certain items feels good on a different, minor level. Those colored bananas have a happy little pluck sound, just adding one more banana to the pot, getting closer and closer to reaching the boss, one banana at a time. Collecting ammo for the Kongs and hearing that sound is so satisfying to me, especially when I'm low on ammo. Not anymore. And the weight behind each gun feels different, even if the outcome is the same. DK's coconut gun and Chunky's pineapple gun are so gutsy and heavy. Of course it's gonna hurt if they shoot you. But then you have Diddy and Lanky's little peanut blaster and grape shooter. Neither look or sound particularly powerful. But I love that the cartoony aspect of it doesn't change the fact that they're deadly. So the second subcategory I want to talk about is the hey, listen kind of category. Not in a Zelda way, but in a hey, are you paying attention kind of sound. An obvious example being the banana fairies. As you progress in the game, it gets harder and harder to find all of those banana fairies. And kind of similar to something like the witches in Left 4 Dead, where you immediately hear the crying in the background and you know what's coming. So you hear a slight shift in the music and the faint banana fairy giggling, and that's when you know maybe it's time to stop what you're doing and look around for them. It's a great subtle way to inform the player instead of interrupting the experience. Like imagine if every time a banana fairy was nearby, Squawks would fly in and be like, "Hey Donkey, there's a fairy nearby, maybe you should go look around." Yeah, obviously I'm gonna do that, you didn't need to tell me. But to hear the music and the tiny little fairies chuckling alerts something in your brain. Stop what you're doing and look around. An even better and more subtle example is with the Castlats. There's 5 of them in each world, one dedicated to each Kong specifically. But this isn't a common enemy that's always waiting for you right at the lobby. Some of these buggers like to hide in not so easy areas to reach. Even if reaching this Kremlin is a challenging task, there's the occasional Castplat that is out of sight. I think about this one at the very top of the production room of Frantic Factory, or this one hidden so far below in Creepy Castle. They're so out of the way, how would anyone think to look there? But when going about your adventure and hearing the Castplat making grunt sounds and bashing the floor to make shockwaves, your brain will register that sound happening. Then you'll freeze, realize you've been looking for that last Castplat for a while, and go searching for it. That's such a useful and creative way to tell the players information through sound. Those subtle, subconscious details that can go overlooked, but that certainly doesn't mean they're being ignored. I think that's a good place for me to hit pause on this subject. We've really only hit the tip of the iceberg when it comes to music and sound effects, especially when it comes to just video games. What are your thoughts on Donkey Kong 64's sound? A very broad question, I know, but I'd love to hear more than just your favorite tracks or sound effects. Tell me below how sound has impacted your experience with DK64, or really any game. And as far as you sound designers of the gaming world, I see you and your air wiggles. Keep up the great work. Thanks everyone, and see you next time.